Hi everyone, Suzanne here with Steadfast Homestead, and today I'm going to talk to you about the different type of wheat berries that I think you should have in your pantry and what to use them for. I have been milling flour for about 3 years now, and I still consider myself in the late beginner, maybe intermediate stage. So when you start out milling flour, a lot of times you're probably just going to start out with a soft wheat and a hard wheat because that's a good way to play it safe while you're kind of learning how fresh milled flour behaves in baking. But as you really get into the fresh milled flour journey, it is really fun to start branching out and trying the different wheat berries that are out there and seeing the reward that is present in the taste and the nutritional value that it adds to the product. So for about the last year and a half, I have been getting into some of the ancient grains and adding them into the things that I'm making, and it has been really rewarding and really fun. So I'm going to talk to you about the different types of berries that I have on hand and how I store them. Obviously I store in glass jars, but that's not the only way that I store as well. So I'll show you some of the long-term bulk storage that I have going as well. So I think you will find this video very helpful, and hopefully when you're done watching this, you will branch out and maybe grab some ancient grains the next time that you get some wheat berries and start trying some of those in the things that you're making as well. So let's get started. All right, let's get started. So I'm going to start out by showing you some soft wheat, and I just have jars that I ordered from Azure Standard. I believe these were the half-gallon jars, and these are the ones that I keep up in the pantry and have filled that I scoop out of during the week when I am baking. But these are not where I do my big bulk storage yet. So I just write on top what it is. This one's almost empty, but it is soft wheat. And let me see if I can get close to the camera here and give a better, without spilling it all over. That's soft wheat. It's not the best view. Let me get back over here. And soft wheat has a lower protein content than a hard wheat. And soft wheat is what you would use for baking items that don't require a rise. So items that aren't going to use yeast or sourdough. So you would use soft wheat in things like brownies, cookies, muffins. You could probably use it in biscuits, different things like that. So it's lower protein content, so you will not use it in something that requires a rise. Again, like yeast or sourdough, you want higher protein content for that. We'll talk about that when we get to those. I will tell you, soft wheat is the wheat berry that I use the absolute least. Honestly, I rarely ever touch it. When I started out my fresh milled flour journey, and I did my research, I started out with a hard white wheat and a soft white wheat. I used it quite a bit in the beginning when I would do some baking, but there's a couple things that I noticed with it. One is when I would bake cookies and brownies with it, they would get old sitting on the counter. It wasn't something that my family would go and eat voluntarily. There was something about it that they just didn't like. But that wasn't the case when I was making bread with hard white wheat. So I knew it wasn't the fresh milled flour in general, but they just didn't really like the things that I was baking with it. So I kind of just really backed off on it. But the other part of it is that I don't bake a lot of sweet treats. I'm just not a big baker here at home. I try to encourage my children and my husband when it comes to snacks to go for fresh fruit and cheese, or if I had some bread ready to go as well. So it's just not something that I use a lot. And then the third reason for that is because once I started getting into ancient grains, I realized a lot of those ancient grains create a much smoother, bolder, and softer texture to some of those baked goods that you would normally use like a soft wheat for. So I think it's good for starting out. I think it's good to have on hand. I started out with a 25-pound bag. I would encourage you to start out with a 5-pound bag. I would not buy the 25-pound bag because you may find that you are not using it that much. So that's the soft wheat. The other basic one that I would encourage you to start out with is hard white wheat. And this has a higher protein content, so this is one of the wheat berries that you would use for bread baking, whether it be sourdough or yeast, cinnamon rolls, bagels, the list goes on there. Hard white wheat is a good one to start with because the flavor is not going to be super strong. It's not going to really stand out and pull through like a hard red wheat is, which I'll talk about next. So it's really good for a beginner, and I think it will help you transition from store-bought bread, or if you're making your own bread with just store-bought flour or bread flour, the flavor is going to be different. Fresh milled flour flavor is different. It is better, and most people will tell you that it is better. But I would encourage you to start out with a hard white wheat, just because the flavor is not quite as intense and robust as it would be if you started out with hard red. So starting out in general, I would get a soft wheat, but a 5-pound bag. But your hard wheat, if you think you're gonna be into this, I would go ahead and get, sorry, the baby is staring out the window at my husband pulling the others in the sled on the snow, and she's having a good time. I don't think you guys will mind. So I would start out with a hard white wheat and a soft white wheat, but I would get a 25-pound bag of the hard wheat because you are going to use it. I can promise you, you're going to use it. Okay, so then let's move on to the hard red. Do some rearranging here. All right, hard red wheat. Currently, my favorite wheat berry. Let me get closer here and show you the hard white wheat and then hard red wheat. You can see that it is a little darker. And I started experimenting with this in my yeast sandwich bread that I make. I, for the most part, do not make a sourdough sandwich bread. I have just not been able, I feel like, to find a good taste and one that turns out well. So I've been doing a yeast sandwich bread, and I started adding in a little bit of hard red wheat, and I gradually added in more and more and more. And it is actually the wheat berry that I put in that sandwich bread the most. My sandwich bread is a mixture of hard wheat, white wheat, kamut, and rye. And it has been very, very good. So hard red wheat, the protein content is even a little bit higher than hard white wheat. So it can help you when you're making your bread to get a better structure. So the protein content is really important for gluten development in bread. So that's why when you're baking bread, a soft wheat is not going to work well. And you can add things like kamut and rye and spelt, but they can't be the main thing that you have in there because the protein content is not high enough. So you're not going to get that gluten development and structure that you need in your bread. So you want the bulk of your flour to be something that has a high protein content, so a hard wheat. And the hard red is going to be even higher protein content than the hard white. And a lot of times, sometimes people have realized that if they just start adding in a little bit of hard red and going down on that hard white a little bit, that they get better structured loaves, and maybe then their bread might turn out better. But I also really started noticing when I was putting in the hard red that the flavor just really came through. It's so good. And the bread itself is darker. It's very pretty, and it's one that when I started adding it in more, that's when I realized, oh, this is fun. because I'm like, my bread's prettier and it really tastes better. And I'm experimenting and I feel like it's turning out and it's working. So starting out, I would encourage you to get some hard red wheat berries. I would say go big and get the 25-pound bag. I get all mine from Azure Standard, so I will link that below, and that's where I would recommend getting them from if you have a drop close to you. I'd get the 25-pound bag because I think you're going to use it. So then the last three that I want to talk about are all three ancient grains. All right, the last three that I have here, spelt, rye, and kamut. So let's start out with kamut. Kamut is the highest protein of all three of these. It is 8 grams. It is not a high enough protein to use by itself in bread or bagels or anything that needs a rise. So if you can add it in there, but it needs to be added at a low percentage. I would say no more than 1/4 to 1/3 of the total amount of flour can be kamut or something with one of these low proteins. Kamut has a very buttery taste, so I use it a lot when I make pancakes. For the most part, I still make pancakes with just a good quality organic bread flour because that's how my family likes it. But every now and then I do some fresh milled pancakes, and kamut is my choice for that because it's just a sweet buttery taste. I also use this when I make homemade chicken tenders, and I will bread them in 100% kamut flour. The next one I want to talk about is spelt. Spelt is 6 grams of protein. So again, if you're going to use it in bread, it needs to be mixed in at a low ratio with all the other flour. Spelt has a very nutty flavor to it. It creates a very soft product as well. I mix it in lightly with some of my breads just for the nutritional value, but I also use spelt for a muffin recipe that I have. I use 100% spelt it's an applesauce muffin recipe that I have, and it is delicious. Spelt is one of those that is good for some of those baked products like cookies and brownies. That's why when we go back to talking about soft wheat, how I don't use it much anymore is because I have found that I can easily substitute soft wheat with kamut or spelt, and honestly, it tastes better. And so the very last one that I want to talk about that I have on hand is rye. Rye is the one that I use the least. At the same time, rye is the one that I'm most excited to learn about and incorporate into some bread. I like the flavor that rye has, like when you're making a good grilled, I can't think of the patty melt. A patty melt on some rye bread, that just really sounds delicious, and I would love to be able to master some rye bread. I have not done that yet, but I do add rye in when I make my sandwich bread at a very, very, very low percentage, but I've kind of been working on getting that up a little bit, just enough to where that flavor can really come through. So I can't say much about rye yet, other than that it's low protein, and of course we all know, that flavor that rye has. And I do want to be able to master that someday, maybe some good deli rye bread. So it's the one that I use the least. So I just have a small 5-pound bag of it, and hopefully, wanting to branch out there with it. So as a recap, if you're getting started into milling flour, here is what I would buy. Your biggest bag, I would get hard white wheat. That's where I would do the biggest investment first. I would get a small bag of soft white wheat because it's a good starter to just see how it behaves in some of your baking and if your family is going to eat it. From there, I would get hard red wheat. I would get a bigger bag of that as well. I think you're going to be very happy with the flavor and the texture that it gives breads. As far as ancient grains, I would definitely get kamut and spelt, because I feel like they can almost be used interchangeably in some of those baking recipes. And kamut is really good for breading things like chicken tenders. I've not tried it on fried chicken yet, but it's on my to-do list. And then if you think you're really going to be into this, I would get some rye just to have on hand and start mixing that into some of your breads as well. Things that I have not tried yet that are still out there. I have not tried einkorn, and I've not tried, if I could even say it correctly, durum, which I know is a popular one for making homemade pasta. So those are on my to-do list eventually, but I'm not there yet. I'm still, again, like I say, I feel like I'm in the intermediate stage, but definitely not the advanced stage. And also, you know, we're not a huge bread family, so I'm not making multiple loaves a week. And so this is just something that I have been experimenting with for the last 3 years, and there are certain things that I use it in on a weekly basis, but again, I don't consider myself advanced yet, but I do feel confident enough to say that I think this is a good start for you.